Edges. Edges are lines that help us distinguish, help us identify, and help us separate. Steve Keto, WMU's Natural Areas Manager, and myself set out to explore some of these edges within Asylum Lake Preserve.
Hi, my name is Steve Keto. I'm WMU's manager of natural areas and preserves, so I'm responsible for 500 acres of university property that falls into this non-traditional landscape, open space, preserves, stormwater features, buffer zones. Today we're standing at Western Michigan University's largest preserve, the Asylum Lake Preserve, and this area has a very rich cultural and natural history dating back to the time of the founding of this state of Michigan. Large grasslands surrounded by trees and these great forests surrounded by grasslands in this wonderful mix of wetlands and uplands and lowlands. And this park-like view of this area is now a globally rare landscape called a savanna. We've lost all our savannas. Savannas were great pieces of land with beautiful trees, wonderful wildlife, and great soils. In our area particularly, Bur Oak Savanna was the iconic landscape. That is extremely rare. While we can see some truly beautiful bur oak trees, even in this area, we do not see a Bur Oak Savanna, that community that has been lost. When we look at different habitats, let's say like a woodland, or a prairie, or a wetland, they all have their own particular community of plants and animals that are adapted to that. And this is not random. These plants and animals sort themselves based on their needs. Food, cover, water, sun, exposure, soils, all those things. So distribution of plants and animals is not random. It is related to biotic and abiotic features in the landscape that make it either something that they can adapt to or something where they cannot live. It fulfills all their needs. What's interesting about edge habitat, when you get the intersection of a woodland and a wetland, or a woodland and a prairie and a wetland, or whatever these combinations are, all of a sudden you not only have the capacity for the very specialized animals, but you also have this area in between which fulfills other needs. It allows either of those animals to utilize the resources in between, or in some cases, very specialized animals again that like this particular habitat. So there are prairie species and there are woodland species, but there are also savanna species. These in-between kind of spaces. In wildlife management, edge habitat's very important because edge habitat allows you this very rich intersection of two ecosystems or two habitats which build on one another and create opportunities that do not exist in either place alone. The prairie is a very unique landscape. In southwest Michigan, we are lucky enough to have these great prairies. We share some affinities in southwest Michigan with the Chicago region where the prairies, the great tall grass prairies began. But here on this site was kind of the blend between the Genesee Prairie slightly to our west, the Bur Oak Savanna slowly kind of morphing into this oak forest. So prairie is a treeless grassland, savanna is a somewhat treed grassland, and an oak forest is far more trees than the grassland. But prairie, as you see, is relatively treeless. These are great landscapes for animals like hawks and owls to hunt in, catching things like rabbits and rodents. Animals that move across the landscape feeding on the seeds and roots and fruits, things like voles and shrews and moles and all sorts of different types of mites as well. The prairies are fire-dependent landscapes. Historically, they were regularly grazed by elk and bison. Remember, this area did have bison. The last bison was killed out of Michigan in 1882. There were elk. There were bear. There were, of course, deer, which we still have today, as well as animals like coyotes and fox and wolf in this area.
After hearing about the past and present animal life on the preserve, I questioned past human interactions on the land. Steve informed me over the cottages that could hold up to 90 people, the piggery, the chicken farms, the dairy farms with the milking operation, the cannery, the orchard, the storage barns, all of which made up a small yet almost thriving city on what we now deem Asylum Lake. Perhaps one of the most well-known elements of Asylum Lake Preserve is the bordering Gibbs House, a historic 160-year-old house that serves as a living laboratory for students to implement their sustainable design solutions and projects.
The Gibbs Farm is on the National Historic Registry. It was built in the mid-1800s by the Gibbs family. Once the area was finally partitioned, there was 2 acres that were left with the Gibbs Farm as part of that historic property, and that was mainly directly behind the house. It was a long, narrow lot with a barn and a small little tree farm behind there that had been planted. When BTR Park was being developed, Rubbermaids wanted a particular footprint, and so what Western did is resurvey and reallocate land, taking away the historical farm property, raising the barn that was there, and giving Gibbs Farm a different property footprint that runs parallel to Parkview Road, thus moving all of the farm operations right up next to the road. There was a reason why farmers put the house up front and the farm behind. The front was the public display and the back was the working farm. What we did is we moved the working farm right up into people's laps. And so we are getting some feedback from local neighbors saying, hey, what's going on there? When if we had left the farm in its original design, that frontage would have been far less offensive to others, let us put it that way.
Not too long ago, the edges between Asylum Lake and human development used to consist mostly of the neighboring eco-friendly and sustainable Gibbs Farm. Recently, industry has begun to interfere with this boundary by installing a Rubbermaid plant behind the Gibbs house, pushing its gardens snug against the preserve's borders. Another intrusion on the preserve is the all-too-close U.S. Highway 131.
When 131 was built, it basically bisected the land that was the original colony farm. So it separated the Ashtamo portion of the property from what we now know today as the colony farm, this little piece of ground between Drake Road and 131, and it basically cut it off. Since then, we've also been taking chunks out of that. For instance, on one end is a Consumers Power substation right away. On the other end was an old trailer park that is part of foundation land that is destined for some retail development. So the property has been already kind of isolated and fragmented. However, I'm very proud of Western Michigan University, particularly in this area of natural areas and preserves and sustainability. For a small school, we have a position like mine, manager of natural areas and preserves, that oversees these properties in a very proactive way. Ecosystem management, passive recreation, education, and research. The goal here is to maintain, improve, enhance ecosystem integrity, ecosystem services, the things that landscapes, that ecosystems do to keep life on Earth going. Number one. Secondarily, passive recreation, to encourage, facilitate, by making this area safe, clean, and beautiful, the ability for anybody to use this property for passive recreation. And thirdly, education and research. This is an educational institution, Western Michigan University, and we encourage education and research on this property, from preschool all the way up to graduate students and beyond.
Mother Maple, I drink from your syrup, and I am thankful for the blood that you bleed. We're in the sugar shack making our porridge, and you are